Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today for our launch party live. We are thrilled to have you here as we count down to the official release. Well, it actually is the official release of our brand new training, Mastering Metabolic Metrics, Testing, Tracking, and Transforming Health, which launched today. So it's hot off the press, fresh release, and it is a very exciting collaboration between Nutrition Network and none other than Keto Mojo, which is why we have our esteemed guests here today. We have Mr. Mojo, Dorian, welcome, and we have Mrs. Mojo, Gemma, over there on the left. If you've got the same, I'm not sure if your screens are configured the same as mine out there in the audience, but it's wonderful to have you. And then there's scientific expert and liaison registered dietitian Franziska Spritzler. Welcome to all three of you, and welcome to the audience. It is a very momentous and exciting occasion that we've gathered to celebrate today.
We're very excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
So over the next, maybe half an hour, we are going to be giving you a sneak peek into what this training covers, why it matters so much right now, and how it's going to help revolutionize your practice and your life and the way we in general approach diagnostics in metabolic health, both in clinical practice and at home. Now, diagnostics, assessment, all those words sound pretty boring, right? They don't sound very exciting, but the truth is, if we can't test, then we don't know what's wrong. And if we don't know what's wrong, we can't treat anything or do anything about it. So testing is super important. And up until now, there has not been any overarching comprehensive training for clinicians, coaches, and lay people alike to be able to know what they should be testing, how to test it, how to interpret it when it comes to metabolic health, which obviously is super important because the majority of deaths in today globally is caused by poor metabolic health. So if we can test it and ideally get it early, figure it out, identify it early, then we can do something early and we can prevent all these diseases and turn the tide on the chronic diseases of lifestyle that are globally such a huge burden. So I think let's dive right in. So I'm going to start with you, Dorian. Could you maybe fill us in on the gap in metabolic or nutrition education that this training is aiming to fill? Why is there a gap? What is this gap? And how does this training fill this gap?
The genesis of all of this goes back several years to a paper that was done by Dr. Sarah Hallberg. And, it's not just about a test. It's also about a standard of care, a method of working. When we move from an episodic method of care, which is what the standard of care that we see in most doctors' offices, where it's like, here, diagnosis, here, take this pill, come back, see me in 6 weeks. Whereas what we're trying to do is bring about a lifestyle change in an individual, because really all diets fail, but lifestyles don't. And lifestyles can be in two different ways, really. You can be having a lifestyle that could be to your detriment and maybe not know it. And then you can have a lifestyle that is that invigorates you and makes you better as an individual and make it very personalized. And the paper that Dr. Sarah Hallberg did was the continuous remote care model. And what we've learned over these 8 years, talking to a lot of clinicians and researchers, we're involved in over 100 different clinical trials, is nobody knew how to do this. There was never actually kind of like a comprehensive method of bringing a group of experts together to show what an acute remote patient monitoring model should actually look like. Because at the end of the day, a well-regulated ketogenic diet is an extremely powerful tool. And I think Dr. Eric Westman's once said, it's pharmaceutical grade. And so when you've got a powerful tool, it must be done with care, especially when we're looking at metabolic psychiatry or if we're looking at trying to deprescribe. And so working with the Nutrition Network and Franziska's immense experience, You guys have managed to put together a really great comprehensive package, and that's why we at Keto Mojo are certainly proud to be partnering with you on this.
Thank you, Doreen. I think that really contextualizes it also well. So I'm going to take this opportunity to quickly jump in there and tell our audience what exactly this training encompasses before we move on, to kind of dive into some of these things in a bit more depth and how it's really changing real people in the real world, because we definitely want to go into that. But I think let's first tell everyone kind of what's in it so that they really know what we're talking about. Okay, so I'm going to run through it. So we have 4 lectures by Franziska Sprisler, who's sitting right here in front of us today. And she focuses, her first 3 focus on ketone testing, glucose ketone index testing and monitoring, and then how kind of protocols and considerations around these things should be, I suppose, encompassed into clinical care and those kind of things. So this is really important for any of you, and I'm going to ask Franziska a bit more about it. But all this, basically, these are the things that you can test with the Keto Mojo machine. And it is so important to know when we should be testing ketones, whether we're doing a clinical trial or whether we're seeing patients. Many of us are like, okay, well, we'll just test, fasting ketones in the morning because that's what we do for glucose. Or like, should we be testing after meals as well? Should we be testing multiple times a day? Or was once a day enough? And kind of what ranges of ketones should we be expecting at different times of the day if we are testing in different contexts or at different times? And then kind of how does that relate to glucose, and for which conditions should the ketone to glucose ratio be X and when should it be Y? There's all these questions around ketones that, so many clinicians who are actually using ketones in their practice still don't know. And Franziska's lectures cover these so beautifully. Then we also, in this amazing training, have got a section on clinical testing. So obviously ketones and glucose ketone index it is a form of clinical testing, but it can also be done at home. But we have a specific section that deals with more the kind of thing that you're going to get when you go into a doctor's room. So lab work, blood draws. What should we be looking at in a ketogenic diet context, in a carnivore diet context, in a vegan or vegetarian context? What bloods are we looking at? How would they change according to what diet we're on? What's normal for one diet might not be normal for another. And this fascinating topic is covered by none other than Siobhan Huggins, and she does an exceptional job of it, giving you reference ranges, altered reference ranges dependent on the diet, specific like alternative tests that you should be doing in certain contexts. Absolutely amazing. Every clinician should do this, and any layperson who's interested in their blood work, honestly, should also know this. Then we have our specialist physician at Nutrition Network, Dr. Hasina Kaji, who speaks to us about the anthropomorphic signs of insulin resistance. So these are things when a patient walks into the room, you can actually see many of these things. But most of us, we don't look at it. We just kind of look at the patient, get their bloods tested, if we're a dietitian, ask for a dietary recall, maybe test the ketones. But some things are right there bang in front of us when we see a client or see a patient. And Hasina, Dr. Kaji, teaches us how to recognize those and what to do about it, and what complementary tests should be done if you see aberrations that are indicative of poor metabolic health. And then summing up the clinical or doctor's room section is Dr. Neville Wellington, a leading diabetes specialist and expert and medical doctor who talks about deprescribing medication with an emphasis on diabetes and hypertensive medications. And this is really important because you need to know what to monitor in order to know how to change the medication accordingly. And this is what he talks about. And then the training, as you can see, is very comprehensive. We don't just have 1 lecture or 2 lectures or 3 lectures. We have many, many lectures. So you walk away with a very comprehensive understanding of what you should be testing. So then we have the lifestyle and sustainability section, which speaks more about like what you can do at home, or what you should be thinking about beyond just bloods and clinical kind of disease things. And this would include things like, how can you monitor diet appropriately? Should you be using photojournaling? Should you be using 24-hour recalls or food frequency questionnaires or, food apps? What should you be using and when? And that's covered by dietitian Beth McNally. She's exceptional and specializes in type 1 diabetes space. And then we have a researcher, Karen Heath from the Noakes Foundation, who covers validated questionnaires. So you actually also need to understand, like, is this person depressed? Are they anxious? What is their quality of life? And does it change from baseline when you see them to later? And which questionnaires should you be using and why? Very, very important. Then we have Peter Cummins, an amazing metabolic health coach who speaks about home monitoring tools beyond your ketone and glucose tools. So things, like your Oura rings or watches or those kind of things, and how to integrate them into your continuous remote care model, which Francisca Spritzler speaks about, the continuous remote care model, which all of these things can actually be incorporated into to give a far better outcome than with the traditional kind of going into the doctor's room once every few months for 15 minutes approach. And we will discuss that more now during this live. And then finally, the course goes into cardiovascular risk assessments by none other than Dr. Matthew Budoff, who's the researcher involved in Dave Feldman's studies on the lean mass hyperresponders, so the keto trials into lean mass hyperresponders and cardiovascular risk. That is an exceptional lecture. Do you do coronary artery calcium scans? Do you do intimate thicknesses? Do you do angiograms? What do you do and when? Why? Which one's best? Which one's not? Those kind of things are exceptional. Then we have a talk on microbiome, assessing microbiome and integrating that into your practice by Dr. Parisa Goswami. And then we have genetic testing, an exclusive interview with Dr. Karen Guetta Milshane, I think you pronounce it, but really amazing, into nutrigenomics. Should you, when you get a gene test, should you be just cutting saturated fat with the ApoE gene or with the, various other things? It's like, should you be doing that, or is there a context to it, and how do we integrate that into our practices? So much. But now that I have these guests in front of me, I'm going to stop blabbering on about what's in there. You can see it is very valuable stuff. And I'm going to ask Gemma if you could tell us about how, this data-driven stuff, from your Keto Mojo tests to the continuous remote care models that you guys are involved into the research. Are you seeing real changes with these interventions? And tell us a bit about these changes, if you will. And Dorian, you're welcome to cut in there and add anything to Gemma if you'd like. But Gemma, let's start with you.
I'm sure he will. Well, we started the company because we saw changes in ourselves. It just, N=2, because we started to monitor, and we saw the difference that it made when you could actually see how food affects you, see how lifestyle affects you in your glucose and ketones. And really the only way to know is if you test to see if you're in ketosis. What we're seeing in our practitioner and our community is that we made the shift from direct to consumer to try to get out there. I mean, the whole reason we're doing this is to get the message out there that the ketogenic lifestyle is so important and so strong. I took the professional training, your professional training in 2025, and was so impressed with just the holistic approach to touching everything. And I think what we're seeing in our community of practitioners and users is that it is making a dynamic change, because you can track, practitioners can see the results. And I think that's the most important thing, is that remote patient monitoring, especially after COVID, that was the silver lining. It taught people that they could actually, practitioners could reach out, and patients could reach their doctors. And I think that's the most important thing, is the reach and making a difference. And I'm sure Dorian has something else that he would want to add, but But that's really the impetus. Is the partnership with you all is just so important, because it's getting it out there and letting people know that they are empowered. They are empowered to take control of their health. Practitioners are empowered to monitor health, and that's the most important thing. It's in your hands. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo that just a little bit. What we see in using a continuous remote care model is greater adherence rates. And generally, if you get greater adherence rates, you get better outcomes for, and I think that's what all practitioners want, don't they? Want for their patients and their clients to have better outcomes in life. I think that's everything. So on to a certain side, on the patient client side, you get this accountability, and you get this immediate biofeedback, and that then is very empowering to the individual themselves. Where when they start and embark on a new journey, and they see their ketones changing from 0.1, 0.2 to 0.4, and then, oh wow, 0.5, they're in ketopia. It's like, whoa, you get this like, I'm the captain of the ship, I'm the master of my soul. And that makes a great deal of difference. And then for the practitioner, the ability in a remote way to see this data come on into their platform. And what they can then do is triage. You can simply, if to those who are doing it all right and correctly, you can quickly send an email to 50, 100 people saying, hey, great job today. Keep up the good work. We love what you're doing. And when was the last time we actually saw a practitioner actually do something like that? You're like, wow, my coach is looking at me. I better behave a little bit here. I gotta make sure I keep to the lifestyle plan. And then what the practitioner can also do is they can see who's struggling in real time. And then they can now basically triage. Instead of this train of people coming into the office, here you can triage remotely and say, you know what, hey, Tamzin, we noticed you're not doing so good today. Here's a link to have a consultation with one of our coaches. And then we can see what's going on to that person's life. Is it sleep that's causing? Is there having some stress that's coming into play? And we can look at those other things as you mentioned, about the aura rings. We can see how stress is coming on in, and we can work out and give the coping strategies. And this is the most important piece, is that there is this interplay between the actual patient client, the practitioner, and trying to change that lifestyle around. And that's kind of like how a correct continuous remote care model works. And then if you look inside of clinical trial work, so many times in so many times in epidemiological studies, they do a questionnaire on food. I don't know what I ate last week. How on earth is that actually going to do that? Whereas a proper clinical trial, we can actually show that the person is in a state of nutritional ketosis, and we actually would know what their time in range is, which is more important to actually having good quality studies. And from those good quality studies, we see the adherence, and with the adherence, we're getting these fantastic outcomes. And I think this is how this whole thing comes together in one holistic approach.
And I think also the lifestyle and sustainability portion is so crucial, because as Dorian could attest to, I've been on about 25 to 500 diets, lost probably 500 pounds, but gained 500 pounds, my whole life. So I think what's important is that it's not a diet. It is not something that you just do and then go off of it when you're feeling better. It's a lifestyle that has to be sustained, and it will sustain you so that you have a health span, not a lifespan. And I think that's important for people to understand, is that it's not just a diet. It's more than that. It's really that lifestyle piece that will help you sustain a healthy life.
Thank you. I think that's all very, very powerful. And I think for those who, I think you've actually, Dorian, you described the continuous remote care model quite well, but I think we haven't, for those people who haven't overtly been told about it, maybe, Francisca, you can just compare the standard, like common old garden, as they say, usual old-fashioned way of dealing with patients, and the modern technologically savvy and might I even say more ethical, considering the outcomes, way of doing it, which is the continuous remote care model. Could you just juxtapose them for us, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. So the episodic care model, which is like the standard care model, is where you see your doctor or practitioner every 3 to 6 months, and they spend, however much time with you. Often it's less than 15 minutes, asking you a few questions, changing your prescriptions if they needed to be changed, giving you some standard advice, and you go on your way. They may tell you to do something specific, but they won't see you for another 3 to 6 months. They don't know what you're doing day to day. They only know what they see when they do your labs 3 to 6 months from then, and then look at you. They don't know what your day-to-day struggles are. They have no idea if you even understood what they told you to do. But if you do this continuous remote care model where you have more frequent contact with the patient and the patient is testing their blood glucose, ketones, GKI, other markers if they're wearing an Oura ring, blood pressure if they have blood pressure issues. All of that information is transmitted to the practitioner in real time so they can instantly reach out, as Dorian talked about, and they see what's going on day to day. Because, just looking at labs every 3 to 6 months, yes, the hemoglobin A1C will give you your average, but that average could have a lot of highs and lows. You don't know what people are doing day to day. This way, you see when people are trending in a good way. As Dorian said, you can reach out and give them support. You can just give them a great job, keep going, or reach out and say, hey, I think we may need to change some things up. Also, in terms of deprescribing, I do think it's almost unethical to try to deprescribe when you're not seeing a patient and talking to them frequently and seeing how their blood glucose and ketones are. Because in some cases, it can be very dangerous to not adjust medication. This way, if you've got a practitioner looking, or even if you have a coach that's reaching out to the patient every day, and that practitioner might not, but the coach works with the practitioner and can tell them, hey, look at this patient. I actually think that it's, probably time for their blood glucose medication to be reduced or even discontinued. And this way, everyone works together. The patient feels more supported. And I think Dorian was talking about adherence. Ketones are a marker of adherence in a ketogenic diet. There's no other lifestyle intervention that does that. I'm not saying there aren't other ways to get healthy. There's other diets. I am personally biased towards a ketogenic diet because I've been doing it a long time and seeing how much it can improve people's lives in dramatic ways. But it is a marker, and you can tell right there by looking what the patient is doing versus, seeing them every 3 to 6 months and trying to look over labs and figuring it out and asking the patient what happened 2 months ago for them to remember when you're not seeing that data coming in real time. So I think that's the big difference is patient feels supported and changes can be made instantly and really in a much safer way and a much more effective way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Francisca. I think you've summed it up, and now we've got great clarity around that. And I see that we've got some people signing in from around the globe. Hello, Denise. It's great. Thank you. I'm glad you're so enthusiastic about the training as we are. And then Daniel Mamedi says, hi, Dorian and Gemma. In my opinion, traditional biomarkers like HbA1c are lagging indicators. By the time they reflect dysfunction, metabolic damage is often already done. In contrast, real-time markers like ketones and glucose ketone index offers earlier insights into metabolic health. Do you see a future where these are adopted more broadly in clinical practice for prevention and not just in disease management?
I certainly see it be much broader in disease prevention. I mean, Francisco, how many clinical trials are we currently involved in? It's over 100 now, isn't it?
We have been involved with over 100, yes.
Yeah, and we've moved from being in these pilot trials where they're in 20s to now we're in sort of like a larger populations. They're now getting to 200 and 300 people. And we expect to get to this kind of like phase 3 where we're seeing it in the thousands to come on through. And, with the advent of new different novel testing devices, we're already seeing continuous glucose monitors. We'll probably see a future of continuous ketone monitoring come on in. There's a few technology advancements that need to happen in CKMs at the moment. I think there's a challenge with the enzymes that they use. They can kind of like give you a direction, but they don't have the granularity that we would see for use for a GKI, a glucose ketone index. We find that in the current iteration of CKMs that we've seen in the marketplace, once they got over about 1.5 millimole, the delta on them got to be pretty big. And I think we go through and looking at the different types of testing, from urinalysis to blood ketone, both CKMs and BKMs. And then we also take a look at breath as well, and the challenges that we see in the current metal oxide ceramic sensor suites that are used in breath, and their limitations that kind of come into play. So I think the foundation, coming back to the question, will be, is that individual in nutritional ketosis, euketonemia, and what are we doing for that individual? Because I think what is needed for metabolic psychiatry and neurological is going to be very different to somebody for type 2 diabetes or just general wellness. And so there's a spectrum of what is necessary. This preconception that a ketogenic diet is hard this myth has come out from its use in epilepsy and 4-1 and 3-1 diets. And yes, they are hard. That's when you're trying to target very, very high ketones, low glucose, and a 4-1 diet, that is a hard thing to sustain. But there might be a period of time where it's like, okay, we sustain it at a certain ketone level. And then once we have the seizure reduction comes on down, then we can be a little bit more just general euketonemia can kind of come into play. That lifestyle piece keeps them around. So it's always that personalized medicine and coming back to the individual and what is their why, and having the correct application and use for those people. And this is how you can target it in the correct way, by using this data set to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I do think while there's much scope for disease prevention and using these monitoring things to basically see, are we firstly if we're doing a ketogenic diet for just optimizing our health and we're already healthy, well, that's great. Then you could use ketone monitoring and glucose ketone indexes kind of to optimize it, or to gamify your health journey so that you're motivated to keep doing it, in the same way that healthy people wear Garmin watches or Apple watches or whatever it is. Or, people enjoy gamification of healthy lifestyle. It keeps them motivated. So there's absolutely kind of that. But then, as Dorian mentioned, in disease management, I think that's where it's most critical, where this is most critical, because as Dorian said, we have different levels of ketosis that we're looking at for different conditions. And there's no way that you can treat a hectic condition, a serious condition like schizophrenia or Alzheimer's or epilepsy or type 2 diabetes. Although type 2 diabetes, let's say that, okay, let's stick to those other mental health ones. Cancer, I'm going to add that in there, for ones that might need really much higher levels of nutritional ketosis, much lower levels of glucose, much higher glucose ketone indexes. And then ones like maybe diabetes, which still can be put into remission using a ketogenic diet, and you still do want therapeutic levels of ketosis. More importantly, might be like looking at your diet apps, which then can integrate with the platforms such as Keto Mojo's platform of continuous remote care, where you can say, okay, well, you're keeping your carbs below a certain level, your glucose is remaining at a good level. It's okay if the ketones stay at like maybe 0.5, that's fine. We don't necessarily need a ketone level much higher, like we might need in those other conditions I mentioned before. So it's really important that clinicians and patients choose the correct thing to monitor, also for the correct patient. So let's say you have a diabetic who is not wanting to finger prick every day. They're wanting to rather log their food on a chronometer and be monitored through the Keto Mojo platform by their practitioner, and maybe finger prick once a week because they've been doing this for a long time. They're kind of in a standard kind of routine. They don't need to do it every day anymore. That would apply to them. But for someone who's just starting and wants to go into psychosis remission of schizophrenia, they need, they're going to need much closer monitoring, much tighter glucose ketone control, all those kind of things. And that's where this training really teaches the practitioner, the coach, the layperson, what to look at for specific individuals, what's appropriate, how do you personalize these things. And this is also where the continuous remote care model comes into its own, is you're able to personalize things, not just throw generalized advice at a person that you see once every 3 months because you don't know what's going on at home or what their struggles are. And so I think, and also, things like the training on the labs. We need to adjust our expectations for certain lab parameters when we do blood draws. We can't just assume that everything's going to be the same and that that's appropriate within a different dietary context. So those kind of things are really important to know. And if you don't know them as a practitioner, your interpretation is going to be faulty. And how ethical is that? So this is super important, super important in my opinion. But maybe, Francisca, could you tell us the implications? Maybe talk to us a little bit about glucose ketone index specifically. What is that, and why is it important to monitor that in certain conditions? And maybe how could it help a practitioner in real life practice?
Sure. Well, the glucose ketone index is just a ratio of glucose to ketones, both in millimole per liter. And it was originally developed to monitor the way that people with brain cancer respond to treatment when they're on a ketogenic diet, and allowing them to personalize the therapy. Because people with brain cancer, especially glioblastoma and other gliomas, those cancer cells use glucose very readily. They use it to grow. So you want to keep the glucose as low as possible to keep the cancer cells from growing, but provide the brain with a fuel source that it can use. So this is how the GKI was developed, but it's now being used in many other conditions, including psychiatry, Alzheimer's disease, and others. And it just shows you how efficiently your brain is now using ketones as its main fuel. And one thing that I talk about in one of my lectures is that just checking glucose doesn't let you know this. Even if your glucose is low, it could be because your body's producing more insulin to keep that glucose low. You test the glucose and ketones and get your glucose ketone index, and you know for sure exactly how much your body has switched over and how efficiently it's using ketones. And for people with severe conditions who need to be at a very high level of ketosis, they want to go for a very low GKI, as low as possible, with the understanding that some people involved in certain treatments may not be able to achieve the very low standards. If they're having like steroid therapy, for instance, during cancer treatment, they may not be able to achieve those levels. Hopefully they can get as low as possible. The other point that I make in, I don't remember which lecture, I think it was probably the second one, is everything needs to be very individualized, even within these ranges, based on how the patient feels and what's possible for them. Because if you make it too stringent that they can't achieve it, they may just give up for good. So that's where the support comes in, is trying to change things around as much as possible, whether it's changing an eating window or anything else. But for people who really want to target a low GKI, just having that support and letting them know, that just keep going. It may not happen every day, depending on what's going on with your treatment. But that's the point of the GKI, I think, and just overall, not just relying on the glucose marker to let you know that you're in good shape.
Thank you, Francisca. So I think this half an hour has run away with us so quickly, and I wanted to end by discussing this partnership between Nutrition Network and Keto Mojo. From our side at Nutrition Network, this training squarely fits into our vision to scale access to high quality metabolic care education worldwide, because this is, as I've said, exactly what clinicians, coaches, lay people need to know in order to be able to treat appropriately. You have to know the metrics, you have to measure to know what's going on, to know how to fix it. So and our vision and our mission is to train as many people as possible so that practitioners, coaches are practicing in ethical and effective ways to really turn the tide on the global chronic disease epidemic, and for lay people similarly to get healthy, really. So maybe you guys from Keto Mojo's perspective can tell us why you really wanted to do this training with Nutrition Network, and what your vision and mission is, and what do you see? What is your foretelling future crystal ball telling you about this training?
Well, I can say that you hit it spot on. It's to get the education globally, so that this is the standard of care. It's not some, alternative diet or therapy. I think that getting the education globally, getting the message out globally that this is a sustainable lifestyle that is healthy and therapeutic. And I think also what's important is that people do realize it's a lifestyle, and that practitioners understand that there has to be a coping strategy for people, that there are substitutions for foods that may be affecting them. There are so many ways now, so many resources out there for people, so that if you want tortilla chips, you can find something that will satisfy that, chicharrones, or something that will satisfy that craving. And I think that's important for the sustainability, is that practitioners understand there has to be a coping strategy. There has to be a way for people to make this a lifestyle. I think all of us here have been on this journey for over 10 years, Francisca 15, I believe, and it's amazing. It's vibrant. It's a way to health, a journey to health.
Thank you, Gemma. Dorian, do you have any last words that you would like to add about the importance of this training and what you hope it will achieve?
To my mind, this is just the start. This is just the beginning. We're at a very nascent period of the use of ketogenic diets in practice, but it's been around for 100 years. And it took us 60 years to figure out that smoking is bad. And yet, I still go out when I'm in Europe and see people smoking outside cafes. We don't see that in California. And that policy change has what's reduced down the rates in California of cancer. So we've got a long road ahead of us, and that partnership with clinicians and clinical trials it will be data-driven and evidence-based. And we will have to present a massive mountain of evidence to the people. But we want to me, the success will be when I can walk into a restaurant and just say, I'm keto, low carb. And it's just accepted as somebody saying I'm vegetarian or vegan. And it's as simple as that. And if we've really done our job, you don't need us anymore, because everybody will be doing it in a preventative method instead of actually trying to go back and fix the cumulative effects of what and the impact of sugar and carbohydrates has done in society. So I think if I speak a little bit for Gemma and I, we're trying to take a multi-generational approach here. And this is just one of the stepping stones to that. But I think it's a massive stepping stone, because it helps set that foundation of how to put this into practice and put it in the hands of people's lives.
And again, empowerment for the patient, empowerment for the practitioner to take control of health.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, those are very, very powerful words, and such an amazing vision, a huge vision, because I know all of us who have been doing this lifestyle for a long time would love to be able to just walk into a restaurant and have keto or carnivore accepted in the same way and known about, and the knowledge to be there in the same way as it is for vegetarians or vegans. Wow, that blows me away, and I absolutely think that everyone watching it and everyone whose life has been changed by this metabolic lifestyle would totally share that vision with you. So this has been such an incredible conversation. Thank you so much to our guests, Gemma, Dorian, Francisca, and to everyone who joined us live, Tony, Emma, Daniel, Denise, Nelda. Wow, we had lots of people. Joe Lone, Jane was there. So it's just so wonderful to see everyone there. Thank you for joining us. And just to recap, Mastering Metabolic Metrics, that's the name of the course, Mastering Metabolic Metrics, officially launched today. So whether you are a doctor, dietitian, health coach, or just passionate about metabolic health, this training gives you the tool to test smarter, track more meaningfully, and transform outcomes through personalized, data-driven care. So you can register now at nutrition-network.org. And if you're already using Keto Mojo, you're going to love how this training helps you to get even more value from the data, or if you're American, data that you're collecting. So thank you again to our partners at Keto Mojo, Darian, Gemma, Francisca, and Sophia and Absentia, and anyone else who's there, and also to my colleagues at Nutrition Network. And to the rest of you, we will see you in the course. Over and out.
Thank you, Tamsin.
Thank you.